This is C-Level Leadership. I'm Darren Mell. I spent most of my career leading and hiring and working alongside people who actually keep organizations running. Not from the mountaintop, but at sea level. This podcast is about leadership as it's lived, not how it's branded. We'll talk about work, pressure, people, integrity, and the quiet decisions that matter long before anyone's watching. No slogans, no hype, just leadership the way it really works. Thanks for listening. Hi, welcome back to another episode of C-Level Leadership. My name is Darren, average human being. You know, when I came up with the cute title of C-Level Leadership, it was really like I had to give it some sort of a name. Not so much for marketability, but really what do I stand for? And, you know, being that this is a podcast and I'm trying to explain things to you the best I can, and that this is new to me. So kind of using your imagination here, what I've designed C-Level Leadership, and again, that's SEA, is really around, you know, we often say if you're a people leader, you're in the people business. And that's why I said, if you're in the people business, shouldn't your leadership plan revolve around people? That's your most important asset. So I want you to think of a bullseye, like someone that is shooting a bow and arrow, trying to shoot for the middle. So I have a math equation, and like I said before, I'm only was a C and B student, so math wasn't one of my strong points. So I put it as 3 P's equal 1 P. And what that means is that if you think of the bullseye, the first P in the middle is people. The second larger circle that surrounds the first one are your products of the company that you work at or work for or own. And then third is your processes, you know, your each and every day in order of importance. And then those 3 together equal the 4th P, which is performance. And I thought about this for the longest time. You know, when you think about leading people, and for those of you that are leaders out there, I ask you to think of it this way, you know, what is your style? And so what C-level leadership is really those 3 main aspects. But then think of a thin layer of that you can see through two squares or rectangles that are laying over that bullseye. And on the left is your procedural infrastructure of how you lead. That's your everyday activities. Everything you do, to how you run meetings, to the agenda, you know, the physical infrastructure of what you do every day as a leader. But then the other side of it that I thought about over time is your emotional infrastructure. You know, the emotions, the person that you're interacting with as you're going about being a leader every day, whether it's a one-on-one conversation, a hallway conversation, a quick phone call before a rep goes into a meeting, or whatever it is. It's the emotions and the understanding of the human aspect of a person as you're going about the actual physical infrastructure. And I'm throwing this out to you. If you're listening to this, I'm assuming you're a leader or have aspirations of being a leader. Like I said, as I started this podcast, it really is about reaching out to the community of leaders, because I don't know about you. I can only speak for myself. Is that I didn't get a lot of training. You just become a leader, and for some reason, people assume that you know what it is that you're doing. And so C-level leadership was built out of, you know, myself having something to slow down and a resource that tells me, am I doing the right thing? Am I really understanding what this person has to say? And one of the points, you know, in the first podcast when I kicked this off, I talked about, I don't know about you, but, you know, I think leadership feels harder than it used to. You know, when I think about it, see if you agree with this, leadership didn't suddenly get harder because people became soft. I think it got harder because a lot of the old tricks of leadership, they stopped working. For a long time, you know, I think leadership relied on proximity and authority. You know, you could manage by walking around. You know, I used to be an inside sales leader that was in an office 5 days a week. So you knew everything that was going on. And if things got tense, you could call a meeting, you could stand in front of the room, and everyone would nod like they understood, even if they didn't, you know. But if you think about it now, even post-pandemic, we're in a world now where 5 days in the office is probably gone. And most of that world So when you look at today's leaders, we're all trying to lead people that we don't always see. And then sometimes their cameras may not be on. Sometimes their Slack message or DM back to you, you might read it differently because of the context in which they said it. What I call C-level leadership, at the ground level, it exists because I believe traditional leadership models weren't built for this environment. They assume visibility equals connection and authority equals influence. And I don't know about you, I don't even like the way that sounds. And, none of those assumptions survive Zoom or hybrid work or the workforce that around you nowadays is actually saying, does anyone actually see me or hear me? And so at C-level, it isn't about being present everywhere. It's about being intentional where it counts. And, that to me is like one of the most important aspects of it. And I don't know, for those of you, what are your thoughts out there on when you hear somebody say that they're burned out? One of the things I thought about recently and wrote an article on LinkedIn was about how burnout isn't really laziness, it's information. And, burnout does get labeled as a weakness, maybe lack of grit, or people not wanting to work anymore. That's convenient, I think, because it lets leadership off the hook. In reality, burnout is rarely a personal failure. It's feedback. It's information. And like the most of the times with uncomfortable information, it's easier to ignore than interpret. And from what I see as a leader for the past 20 years, people don't burn out because they don't care. They burn out because they care for too long in the systems that they don't give clarity, boundaries, or emotional air cover. They're trying to do good work while navigating shifting priorities, a lot of times unclear expectations, and leaders who think saying things like, we're all in this together, it counts as support. And my style of leadership that I preach and live by isn't so much like asking people, how do we get more out of them? It's more along the lines of like, what are we asking people to carry? And have we bothered to notice the weight? And if you look at it that way, that one question changes how leaders think about productivity, accountability, and sustainability. And yes, it makes your leadership a little less comfortable. But I would say that is a sign that you're actually doing it right. Empathetic leadership has the ability to transform workplaces, and it improves morale. It also enhances productivity. When I say my cute little term of C-level leadership, it isn't about lowering expectations or pretending that leadership is easy. It's about recognizing that results don't exist without relationships, and accountability doesn't survive without trust. This podcast that I'm hosting, I'm not asking you to become a different kind of leader. I'm asking you really to think of yourself and become a more aware human. One who understands that leadership doesn't happen in titles or org charts. From my experience over 20 years, it happens in moments, conversations, and decisions that most people never see. And for those of us in the middle, as I've said before, I am the middle of three boys. I am the middle seat on an airplane. I am middle class, and I have been leading from the middle my entire life. And honestly, I think that that's where leadership really belongs. My recommendation to you all as a leader is really to check yourself regularly to assess your emotions and your emotional state as you lead your team each day. They're going to feed off your energy and you set the tone. I believe that all of us here have the ability to make a difference. And it's really my leadership style, and what I will continue to preach throughout these podcasts, is putting people at the center of your inspirational, empathetic, and successful leadership plan. That's what it's all about. And when you do that, the rewards that you can get personally on both sides are fantastic. That's all for today. My name is Darren Mell, average human being. Thanks for listening. This has been C-Level Leadership with Darren Mell, average human being.